Hello, 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 everybody. How are you? Salute to you, salute to you, salute to you all. Welcome, everyone, to Office Hour 20 of Data Science Unit 1, brought to you by World Quant University and the Data Incubator. It's me, your data science pal, Nicholas. I'm here again to rock and roll with you guys. How's everybody doing out there? Happy to those who celebrate Halloween. Happy Halloween to you. Very excited to see you all hanging out. Happy data science to everyone. It's good to see you all again. Always a pleasure, always exciting. Christiane is asking about the videos that we have. Well, actually, let me just open up the chat uh, just right here. For people that are interested in the notebooks that I sometimes post after office hours, they're right here, the 6 of them. These are the only ones that I know about. So if there are more, let me know. Maybe I mistakenly didn't post them, but these are the ones that I have. You guys are seeing the same thing that I'm seeing. I see Andrea's wanting to know how many people pass Unit 2. I actually don't know the answer off the top of my head. Okay. uh, Ajao wants to know if the weather is cold in California. I gotta tell you, it is cold. It was cold today. It was like 12 degrees when I woke up this morning in Celsius, which is cold for me, but I'm kind of a wimp. And I see Simon saying that they were having trouble seeing one of the videos on YouTube. I thank you for pointing that out. That was brought to my attention, and I did change it, so you should be able to view it now. Okay, let's jump on in. And what I am going to do is I'm sort of curious. I'm going to ask you guys for your questions. What is it that you would like to focus on today? I know we finished up the last mini project, and we didn't have a mini project for this week, and we won't start, if I scroll down, we won't start the DW mini project until, well, actually, wait, what are we on, week 5 now? So we could also look at the DW mini project. What are you guys interested in looking at? What do you folks want to look at? Let me know. Some people want to dig more on pandas. I like that idea. Some people want to look at the DW mini project, absolutely. We can do all of these things. So I see pandas, and I see DW. Beautiful. What sort of pandas questions do people have? Well, I'm seeing lots of votes for the DW mini project. And then for pandas, I see questions about aggregating and also filtering. Okay. Filtering we looked at yesterday, so I'm going to refer you, Tatanka, to yesterday's office hours, but we can definitely do more aggregating. And we see also we have, what else do we have? Ag filtering, time series. Okay, excellent. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. We can do all of these exciting things. Where to start learning? Okay, well, let's dive into the PW mini project and we will see how far we get. I'm going to make this text a little bit bigger so that it's easier for you guys to see. And then I'm going to go to data wrangling, mini projects, and DW. And the first thing I'm going to do is just import the first two cells, always the most important things to do. And let's see here. This is going to all be about creating summary statistics and wrangling large bits of data. So let's get to it. I'm super excited. I'm going to download some of this data here. It's all going to just pop up on my screen. And once the data is done, whoops, let me scroll up. We're going to be dealing with a similar data set to what we were looking at before. The same medical data that we were looking at before, but this time we're going to do it with pandas so we can see how things are, well, a little bit easier, let's be honest. Okay, so I've downloaded the data and I need to get my, before I had list of JSON files, now I need to get this data set in data frames, So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my data wrangling folder and my mini projects folder. And if I click, there's a folder called DW data. DW data. And what I need to start with is I need to start with the 2017 scripts data and then also the practices data. Now, here's my first question to you guys. What are the file formats here? What are these file formats? Afiz says they're a gzip file, and Ishmael says they're a CSV, and Andrea has put those two together and said it's a gzipped CSV. So it's a compressed CSV file. So Jay, you're absolutely right. It's comma separated values, everyone, but in this case, they're zipped. They're zipped up, and so what we need to do is we need to unzip them. But lucky for us, Pandas actually does that for us automatically. So what we need to do is we need to read this into a data frame the same way we would read any CSV file into a data frame. And what's the method for reading a CSV file into a data frame in Pandas? I love seeing all these answers, guys. This is fantastic. Oh, excellent. You guys have got it. It's definitely read CSV. And then I also need to put in the file path, which in this case, if I go back to mini projects, is here in DW data. So I need to put in DW data. And then once I'm in DW data, I can actually put in the 2017 scripts sample. And you may notice that the words are popping up on the screen here. That's because I'm using the tab button. And one of the cool things about this Jupyter Notebook is that it's going to auto-complete by looking through the directory. So I'm going to do that here. And once it's loaded in, I'm going to see that I have my 7 features. My 7 features. And another thing I'm going to do, because I always do this, is I'm going to I'm going to ask for the info method. And the info method is going to give me all the information I need about the data frame. So for example, I can see that the first 3 columns, practice, BNF code, and BNF name. Let me scroll up here. Practice, BNF code, and BNF name. Their data type is object, which is the same as a string. So I know that the first 3 columns have strings. And then I know items is an integer. And then the remaining columns, NIC, ACT cost, and quantity are all, well, actually, NIC and ACT are floats, and then quantity finally is an integer. So I'll keep this in mind as I work with this data set. And then I need to do the same thing for the practices. So I'm going to do PD read CSV, and it's going to be a similar file path, DW data slash practices. And if I do this, well, actually, this doesn't seem to be working. These actually, the headers here are actually the first row. So it looks like in this CSV file, there is no header row. How can I resolve that? How can I have the column names actually up here. How can I add them to my data frame? What do you guys think? I need some sort of header argument. I could do something like header none. I could do this, header none, and that would solve one problem, but it would create another one because now there are no names. It's just automatically named them by integers. And in fact, the best way to do this is I can put in names and I can add in that list of column names. And actually, I think I can also do columns. Oh no, in this case I can't. This would just be names. Now I'm doing good. Now I'm doing good. So I've passed in this list of column names as my name argument, and now I have this beautiful data frame and I'm ready to go. And last but not least, I need to look at the chemical substances, So I'll do PD read CSV again, and I'll put in DW data again, and I'll put in chem, and now this one does have a header. And so I have all my data imported, and I'm ready to go. But before we get into question one, how are there any questions you guys have about the importing? I see two great questions, and let's look at them one by one. Actually, I'm going to do them in reverse order. So the first thing, Kingsley mentions that here I have names, and I'm passing in a variable which refers to my list. And Kingsley's absolutely right. I could take this whole list and just drop it in right here, and I would get the same result. So that's not a problem. The reason why we do it this way, and maybe this is a question of style more than anything, is it's easier to read if you create the column names as a variable first, and that way your read CSV line of code is kind of easy to take in. Now, another great question comes from Simon, and Simon wants to know what would happen if I passed in header none. Would this be, in terms of practical considerations, what would be the problem here? Well, the main problem would be that every time I wanted to reference a column or a series in this data frame, I would need to actually remember which numbers corresponded to which columns. And it's much easier for me if I can actually, oops, hold on, not header column names, this would be names equals column names. It's much easier if there are actual words that I can refer to when I am looking at the columns. So it just makes life easier. And Christian wants to know if we can combine two files into one data frame. Absolutely. That's totally possible. And I won't do it now, but I think we'll have time at the end of this. I'll do it at the end. Okay? So just remind me again, Christian, and we'll look at that because that's a great thing to know how to do. Okay. And then what are some other things? Andrea wants to know if we can change the data type. Another great question. So let's say, for example, when I was importing the this this data frame, the scripts data frame, I realized that even though pandas assumes that the items column is integer, I actually want it to be a string. Well, there's a way to do that, and it's with the dtype argument. And when I'm going to put this on a new line so it's a little bit easier to see. When you have the dtype argument, what you do is you pass in a dictionary, and the key of that dictionary is going to be the column name, and then the value is going to be the data type. So now, if I import this, although it looks the same, if I redo this, and I look at items, I can see now it's an object. So that's how I could change the data types in my import call. Now I'm actually going to delete this because we don't want to do this in this case. We're going to be using that information as numbers later, but that's how you would do it. And then Chinmay wants to know, what is the maximum length of column data which can be read? Well, I mean, that's really not a question of pandas. It's a question of how much RAM you have on your computer. But we can, I mean, we're talking millions, millions. I could easily just take in several million rows. It wouldn't be a problem. But again, it'll depend on your computer. And then let's see here. Andrea wants to know if you can do string instead of object. With pandas, you actually need to say object if you want it to be imported as a string. So it's one of those little confusing details about pandas. And then Jay wants to know, how can we do this where we actually have this the things missing here? Well, the truth is it depends how you do it. Because on the one hand, if I put my column names in first and then after that I do D type, I can then pass in a dictionary using those column names. So I could have code and I say I want it to be an object, and it would work. But if I did this in the opposite order, oops, let me put a comma here. If I did this in the opposite order, actually it would still work. So as long as you add the column names in there, you will be fine. And then the other thing you can do is I believe you can also put in the like the index as if it were a list. Yep. So you could either do the number. So if I actually removed this and did it this way, yep, it would also parse this as a string. So that's how I would do it. Okay. Let me just get this back to where we were before. Beautiful. All right. So to review where we are up to this point, we had 3 files on our machine, on our machines, and we needed to import them. We need to import them, and we did that using read CSV. For the CSV files where their headers were present, there's not much we needed to do. For the CSV file where the headers were not present, we needed to add them. And then one last question is coming from Tatanka. They want to know if this whole data type logic also applies when we're using JSON. Um, it depends on, okay, my answer is yes, but. So I'm going to say, generally speaking, yes, but it depends on how those numbers are stored, right? For example, if in the text file, the JSON file, all your numbers are stored in between quotation marks or inverted commas, then they might be parsed as strings, not as numbers. So you would have to do an additional level of cleaning. All right, other questions, or should we move on to question 1? All right, let's move on. Okay, so what do we want to do here? Well, here, generally speaking, we want to come up with some summary statistics. And remember that in the previous mini project, we calculated the mean, we calculated the standard deviation, and then the quartiles for several of the fields. And we had to write a special, like a special function to do it for us, which was, exciting, but maybe not that exciting. In this case, what we want to do is we want to actually submit the data. We want to submit these summary statistics, but we want to submit it as a tuple. One other thing, I want to back up for 1 second because Andrea said something very important. Sometimes when you import your data into pandas, it will complain about mixed data types. And what that means is it's saying, listen, I looked at the values in this column, and it's ambiguous to me as to whether they are strings or integers, or whether they're integers or floats. And what pandas will do is it'll just make its best guess. It says, these looked like, they could be strings, they could be integers. I just made them all strings. I made them all objects. And if you get a question like that, or if you get a warning like that, usually the best thing to do is to have that D-type argument and include that dictionary, just so that for pandas there's no ambiguity. All right, so let's take a look here at something. One method that we talked about yesterday for doing exploratory data analysis in pandas is the describe the describe method. And if we type in describe scripts.describe, what it's going to do is it's going to give us 4 columns: items, nick, ACT cost, and quantity. And it's going to give us a lot of information that we need, right? Things like the mean, the standard deviation, the quartiles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's good. Here's a question though. This object that's being returned to me, what is the data type of this object? What do you guys think? So Christian and Andrea say that this is a data frame. Let's check. And indeed, it is a data frame. And if I look at it again, it is formatted like a data frame, right? It has column headers along the top. It has these index labels. And for those of you that who said float, you're right that the values inside the data frame, all the columns seem to be floats. And it's true that a data frame is made up of series. There are 4 series in this data frame. But in this case, as a whole, this is a data frame. Now, here's a question that I have for, and Andrea's right, we have almost all the values here that we need. What is the value, what value or values are we missing? We're missing total. Okay, so we're missing total. Well, how can I get the total? The total or the sum. How can I get that? I could do count times mean. That's true. You guys are absolutely right. You guys are math magicians. All right, well let's think about this here for a second. I love this. And then Hafiz also has another idea. We could also just look at one of the series. For example, we could look at scripts and items and just look at the sum. That's another possibility. Okay, so then what should we do next? what's our next step? I know one thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the list of fields we have here, the list of fields we're interested in. I'm going to copy and paste them from the instructions. And let's see here, this goes here, beautiful. And I'll put this in as a list. Love it. And I'm thinking that it would be a lot easier. It would be a lot easier to take the count and multiply it by the mean if this data frame were transposed. If we could like just rotate it 90 degrees, that would be super helpful. Or if we could turn the rows into columns and columns into rows. How can we do that? Do you guys have any ideas? Yaya says I should transpose. And indeed, if I look up the documentation, it does seem like there's a transpose method that I can use on my data frames. So let's just try this. I have scripts describe, and then I'll do transpose, and let's see what comes out. Ah, this is looking pretty good. And I think actually you can also do it just by putting in a capital T. Yep, that'll do the same thing. And the capital T comes from NumPy, or we can just use the full verbose version called transpose. So now that I have this information, I'm going to call this summary, and I'll save it as something called summary. And from there, how can I calculate the total? How can I multiply these two columns together? And Christian has the exact idea. I can create a new column, and I'm actually just going to copy and paste Christian's code in here. And let's take a look at it. And there we go. I now have the total. So we're getting really close here. I think the next thing to do is we just need to reorder these columns. So I'll say summary equals summary, and I'm going to look up here. Here we go. And it's going to be total, mean, standard deviation, median, and Q75. I'm just going to put that here, and I'll have total, mean, standard deviation. I'll start a new line here, and this won't work, Q25, but the column header is called 25%, so I can put that in there. And then I need the median, which would be the same as 50. And then finally, I would have 75%. And voila, here is my beautiful data frame. Okay, questions up to this point. That's a great, Jay is asking, are we going to have a problem given that here the total is printed out in scientific notation? Well, let's see. Let's print out one of these options and see. Summary, so I'll do summary loc, and I'll say items and total, and let's see how it's printed out. In fact, it's printed out as a float, so that might be a problem that it's a float, but here's what we can do. We can recast it. So for example, if I go summary total, I could go, let's see here. I could go as type int. And those would turn it into integers. And so what I could do is just go summary total equals summary total as type integer, and I'll recast it. And we don't need to worry about this. Well, this is fine. We'll just keep it like this. The other thing I could have done is when I first created this, I could have wrapped it in parentheses and put int around it. So that way, let me just re-import it so we can see from the beginning. I'll re-import it here, and then I'll scroll down, and first I'll do my transposition, and then I'll do my new summary. Oh wait, it's unhappy with me. Can't convert the series to class int. Well, or I could have also done it as, actually I could have done it like this, as type int. Excuse me, as type int. There we go. So I could have done it up here as well. It's just kind of like 6 one way, half a dozen the other. It doesn't make a lot of difference. Okay, so I've done this, and the question is, I have this all as a data frame, but I need to turn it in. I need to submit it to the grader as a list of tuples. So how do you guys think I can do that? Hafiz has one idea. I could do something like summary.loc items and then this. That gives me a series, it looks like. I could definitely use a list comprehension. I like that idea. But the question is, what are we iterating through? So Andrea says maybe values, but unfortunately, that gives me, well, I mean, it's not fortunate or unfortunate, just is what it is. I get a NumPy array, but I have the same problem. I still need to get my NumPy array into the proper format. Now, Hafiz has one idea. I could do something like for x in summary.index, and then I could do something like print summary.loc, or yeah, summary.loc c values. And that gives me the rows one by one. If I wanted to unpack them, that's another way to do it. Another option is I could do something called iter rows, and it would be for label row in summary dot iter rows. And what that does is, well, let's print it out. It either prints the labels or it prints the labels and the row. I could do it that way. But again, then I would have to do something like mean std. It's getting complicated. And Afis has an idea where I could do, I'm just going to copy and paste their text. I could just go for the values, and that would give me something here. That would give me, now I'm starting to get into the right format, but what I'm missing here is the name. And I think that the answer is halfway between what I was saying with iter rows and what Afis is saying with tuples, because in fact, there's something called iter tuples. So if I look at summary and then iter, I have iter tuples. And if I just look at that as a list, here I kind of have everything I need. Let's just look at this for a second. So here are each of the rows. And if I want to get the first item, which is the name, the index, I could do it this way. And if I wanted to get the other items, I could just do 1 through the end, which would give it to me this way. And so based on that, I can take my iter tuples and I can put it in a list comprehension. And I'll say for row in summary iter tuples. And then I'll create my tuple where I'll have my row 0, which is the index, and then row 1 through the end, which is everything else. And now I have a list full of tuples where the first item in the tuple is the column name, and the second item is another tuple that has all of my summary statistics in it. And so what I'll do is I will save it and I'll comment this out and then I'll run it through the grader and see what I get. Oop, it says it's too short. What am I missing? Oh, excuse me. I still kept the 0 here, so I was only passing one value. What I actually want is everything. There we go. That's my 1. Beautiful. Okay. Thank you, Vladimir and Andrea, for helping me troubleshoot the code. Questions. Questions about what we did here for number 1. Tatanka has a very good question. Why do we need to have these tuples for our statistics? Why do we need to put everything into this format? And that's a very valid question. A lot of times, a lot of times you don't need to do that because you have your summary statistics right here. But there are times when you'll have data in a data frame, and for whatever reason, maybe it's stored in a document, in a text document, or in a database, and that database takes a different kind of format. For example, the format that we're seeing here, where it's a list of tuples. And so, part of the sort of data wrangling or data munging that a data scientist will do is often just getting things in the right format to move them from one part of a company's workflow or of a project's workflow to another part of a company's project or workflow. And then Jay has a question about whether it's possible to navigate through a data frame like a Python list, like you do for I in range whatever. And you can, that is possible, but um, the issue is that what am I trying to say here? The issue is that the way that Python pandas is configured, if you find yourself doing some sort of iteration over a data frame, it probably means that there's a more efficient, a quicker, a less computationally expensive way to do it, because pandas is set up to take care of issues like that. All right, we're going to go a little bit over because I did promise that I would do joining two files. And so let's look at that really quickly. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to DW data and I'm going to go to chem and I'm going to duplicate it. And we'll say we have those two files and we need to put them together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to import, I'm going to go from glob, import glob. And what glob does, glob is a great tool where it lets you basically collect lists of files. And in this case, you pass it a file pattern. So I'm saying any file that starts with chem and then ends with .gz. And you can see it's going to give me a list of two files. And then what I'll do is I'll create a for loop. So I'll go for file in files. And actually, the other thing I'll do is I'll go frames. I'll create an empty list. And then I'll go for file in files, df equals pd read CSV. And then I'll pass in the file name. And then I'll go frames dot append my data frame. And what that means is that I now have this list called frames, and there are 2 items in it. And the type of items in this list are both data frames. And once I have both my data frames in a list, I can use another thing that comes from pandas called pd.concat. And then I pass in my list of frames, my list of data frames. And now I have one big data frame. So remember that, let's go here, print chem shape. Our original chem data frame was 3,487 rows. And if I print my big data frame, it's 6,974. And so what I've done is I've just taken 2 copies of the data frame and put it in together. But you can definitely imagine, and this happens all the time, where you're given like 13 CSV files, maybe they're like log files, and you want to analyze them as a group. What you would do is you would put them all in a list using a tool like Glob. And then one by one, you would read those files into data frames. Then each of those data frames you would append to a list, and then you would pass that list to concat, and it would put it together as a single big data frame. And that's how you work with multiple files. Okay, guys, I have to take off. I have to get my Halloween costume ready. I have to get my candy ready so that I can pass it out to all the little kids in the neighborhood. I hope all of you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And one last announcement before I go. Huh, what is happening here? Hold on. There we go. Please keep in mind that daylight savings time in the US ends this Sunday. That is Sunday, November 3rd, which means that for some of you, the times for office hours will also change. It may be an hour later. Now, on your Jupyter Hub, it should automatically adjust here in the video links section. The schedule should automatically adjust to your local time. But just keep in mind, in case there's any confusion on Monday, that it may be at a different time. So don't forget, have a wonderful weekend, everyone. And until we meet again, happy data science and trick or treat. Take care. Bye bye.